Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome all the participants and members of the public watching on YouTube to the July Executive Committee meeting of the Board of Visitors of William & Mary. We are glad to have you all with us. Today, the Board of Visitors Executive Committee is meeting virtually in accordance with item 4-0.01.g of the 2020 Appropriation Act, which provides governing boards the ability to hold meetings electronically without a quorum present while the Commonwealth is under a state of emergency. Please note, all audio should be muted. For board members and staff members who wish to participate, please identify yourselves when you'd like to be recognized. I'd like to start today's meeting by officially welcoming Cynthia Hudson to the board. Cynthia is a graduate of William & Mary Law School and an accomplished lawyer, having served as Hampton City Attorney and Chief Deputy Attorney General for Virginia. She is now in private practice. Cynthia, we are glad to have you as a colleague and look forward to your contributions to this board and the university. I'd also like to congratulate Barbara Johnson, who became Secretary of the Board on July 1st. Barbara has been an active member of the Board of Visitors and a great colleague, so thank you for serving here. It's also the official start of our faculty rep, Professor Tom Ward, our staff rep, Ms. Ariel Newby, and lastly, our student rep, Anthony Joseph, who seems like he's been with us for a few months. We're really glad to have all of you with us. While most of the board is present for today's call, this is technically the Executive Committee's meeting. While we await approval of the bylaws in August for an expanded Executive Committee, today we will follow the membership of the 2019-2020 Executive Committee, with Ms. Johnson substituting as Secretary for Ms. Girdleman. So when Michael calls the roll, if we have one thing we're going to vote on, it will be for those individuals. Since our last meeting in June, there has been much work done on all the areas that we had discussed. Notably, we completed triumphantly the For the Bold campaign. Special thanks and congratulations goes to Matthew Lambert, Mark Begley, and the entire advancement team, to our own Sue Girdleman and the steering committee for leading it, and to Presidents Reevely and Rowe for taking it over the finish line. The successful completion of this campaign was one of the board's goals, and it will have a significant meaning to the life of this university for many years. And in addition, we now have a clean-shaven vice president for advancement. We also conducted another successful One Tribe, One Day. This year, with the focus on several of our D&I initiatives, we were able to provide needed funds to the Diversity Inclusion Fund, the Lemon Project, the Scholarships Impact Fund, and for the construction of the Memorial to the Enslaved. And as a reminder, all contributions to that construction will be matched by the board. Thank you to everyone who contributed to One Tribe, One Day. The renaming group chaired by our former colleague, Dr. Warren Buck, has met a few times and is on track. I'll let the president brief us on their work, but we will plan to begin acting on the recommendations starting in August. And I also want to thank AJ for serving on that as well. I also want to acknowledge the extraordinary work that has gone on by administrators, faculty, staff, coaches, facilities workers, and beyond to ensure that our campus remains as safe as possible. We are cognizant of the critical role that every member of our community has to enable a safe and healthy reopening. It's easy to imagine that this board, the president, the provost, and COO make all the decisions relative to reopening and that's it. But the reality is that every part of the William & Mary community needs to be engaged in a healthy reopening. In the past few weeks, I've interacted with administrative assistants, athletic staff, housekeepers, and grounds crew, student affairs staff, and I am so impressed with the attention to detail that is occurring throughout campus. Lastly, we appreciate the outpouring of support and comments the board has received in the past few months, both those with suggestions and those with criticism, from parents, students, faculty, alumni, and others, about a wide range of things from COVID issues to this unique moment to aggressively address racism and to international study. While we may not be able to respond fully to everything, please know that we read these comments and utilize them as we deliberate on our next steps. As we chart a path forward, it is very helpful for us to consider a wide range of perspectives. Our goal has always been to make decisions that will protect and advance our students, staff, and faculty, to ensure that our mission continues and flourishes despite this pandemic for all time coming. While I still have the floor, I would note that we are blessed to have an amazingly thoughtful, deliberate, and competent leaders at both William and Mary and Richard Bland College. Many of the qualities that made us select Catherine Rowe as the 28th president have been so remarkably evident in these past few months. Her leadership, collaborative skills, and the functional team that she has built have been and will continue to be great strengths as we collectively face the challenges ahead. With that, I'd like to invite the president to provide an update to us.
Thank you, Mr. Rector. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? My internet connection is a little bit unstable, so I'll try to watch for it to bounce and go slow when I need to. Our goal for today is to share key updates on 3 mission-critical areas: William & Mary's fall planning, our financial position, and our anti-racist efforts to increase diversity and inclusion on this campus and in the larger community. I'm going to speak at a high level about all 3, and then I'm going to hand off to Sam Jones, Amy Sebring, and Dr. Sean Glover for more detail. But let me begin with fall planning, and I'm going to be very direct. The national picture for reopening is increasingly grim. Everyone who reads the news hears this. Well, what's driving William & Mary's decision-making is scientific indicators. Everyone who tracks COVID-19 indicators, as I do every day, knows this. By the way, I'm using the Johns Hopkins data and a number of sites that work with that data. When we began fall planning, we were anticipating a lull and then a second wave. And it's becoming clear that we are still in the first wave of pandemic in the United States, with the prospect of a second rising peak. And even in Virginia, where cases had been relatively low this summer, 2 leading indicators that had been quite positive for weeks, the effective reproduction number and positivity rates, began trending in the wrong direction last week. So we're facing now similar decisions as we did in March, but we're facing them under different conditions and with different information. So I want to say a little bit about that point that we're at. On the positive side, we have a much better understanding about how the virus spreads, about effective ways to mitigate risk, about effective treatment protocols in the nation. Testing is rapidly improving, and William & Mary has the capacity, in partnership with our peers in the public university system in Virginia, to deploy testing and other protocols in ways that we could not do in the spring. There are real sources of hope in the evolving science, and we are continuing to build capacity in partnership with our peers based on the epidemiological modeling in our major university medical centers and based on consultations with local public health officials and in Richmond, the Virginia Department of Health. That's the positive side. There's more positive too, I'll come to. But on the negative side, what's increasingly clear is that our country has not responded with sufficient aggressiveness in providing the infrastructure needed to protect those whose health is and whose livelihoods are most vulnerable. The profound inequities of pandemic have shown very starkly in recent months. Much worse rates of infection and health outcomes for Black and Brown communities, for older populations, for those with pre-existing conditions, and those in frontline service industries. Much worse economic prospects for low-income communities, much worse prospects for those who lack infrastructures such as broadband in rural areas and other areas. And I'm not nearly covering the full picture. I know many of you are following it as well. So at this moment, I think we need to begin again with first principles, and I'm going to name them and ask everyone in this community to hold them at front of mind. Our priorities under pandemic, as the rector said, have been and they remain: first, to safeguard the health of our staff, students, and faculty, and families, and our neighbors, using all the tools we have at our disposal to the best of our ability. Second, to meet our mission, to keep teaching, to keep learning and pursuing new knowledge, and to ensure that our students maintain momentum to their degrees and into their lives as citizens and professionals, despite pandemic conditions and in a moment where that momentum matters so much, especially to those who are not already in a living environment or a community that's going to advance them swiftly. Our timeline right now is longer than it was in the spring. That's one of the things that's changed. It's really clear that we're not managing just to a few months, but we're managing probably to at least a year. And with those two goals in mind, it's incredibly important, I think, for me to speak to why we have been planning to and striving to return in person. As we promised we would, we've reviewed what we learned this spring, how our students experienced remote learning under pandemic. And no one should be surprised to hear that for many students, the experience was uneven, and for many, it wasn't good. It's not, I say that not for the lack of complete dedication and creativity and resourcefulness of everyone in this community, faculty and staff, our alumni and donors, administrators, and the students themselves. The chief obstacles that we faced were givens of the pandemic, and we worked to redress them, but could only partially do that. The first is isolation. We know from research that isolation is a huge risk factor in learning, and we saw that so clearly this spring. And the second is the facts that many students live in environments where it's really not possible to focus well on studying, despite so much effort by William & Mary faculty and student affairs staff to ensure online access and success. The fact is that the quality of the resources for remote learning, online learning on campus are excellent, and they are not matched in many students' home learning environments. This is much more acutely true for our low-income students, for those with food and housing insecurity, in Black and Brown communities and rural communities, those with working parents or children that they're caring for, loved ones they're caring for, all those who are hit very hard by pandemic. So there's a lot more I could say about that, but if you understand those two critical baselines, the power of the learning community here and the power of the learning environment here on campus to redress profound inequities for our students, you understand why we've worked so hard to find a way to bring students back to campus that's consistent with the safety of our staff and faculty and our neighbors and the students themselves. Return to campus neutralizes so many inequities. Knowing that and knowing that the national and local context is trending in the wrong direction, we are continuing to plan in a phased way so that we can adjust as conditions change. So a couple of words about that. First, that we are working here to build the infrastructure that could make it possible to house students on campus in a way that protects our vulnerable employees. Understand, William & Mary and our peers are working to build an infrastructure that has not been built nationally. Federal and state agency guidelines do give us context in which to work, and we're exceeding the guidance that we have in the systematic safeguards that we're putting in place, and we are blessed with amazing partners around the Commonwealth. We also recognize that William & Mary doesn't control the virus. This isn't hard for a high-achieving community. It's really hard. So we're developing criteria around which we would change course if we needed to in the near term, and what would require us to quarantine broadly or send students home should conditions worsen. I'm going to be sharing those criteria at the latest by early August, and I'll continue to be as transparent as possible as we track changing public health conditions. Between now and then and through this fall, I'm going to ask for your patience so that we can make decisions that are wise as possible, with the best information that we have as that information changes, and as consultatively as we can. At the table in those consultations are the leadership of Staff Assembly, PPFA, Faculty Assembly, and Student Assembly. We want to be sure that those voices are heard as clearly as possible as we weigh our decisions. So here's some really good news. With all that, the faculty and instructional staff and the staff who support our educational mission have worked with their deans under the guidance of the Provost's office to declare the mode of preferred delivery for their fall courses. The basic principle that we use here in our planning is that we set direction centrally, but we problem solve and design solutions locally. At the local level, we're going to get the best solutions. The headline is that with incredible effort and creativity, William & Mary is set up for maximum curricular flexibility no matter what comes. Those who have set their teaching preferences based on their disciplines, their teaching goals, and their personal situations have given us a very healthy ratio of in-person, blended, and online courses, and the ability to shift. William & Mary teachers have been so creative and committed in building that adaptable curriculum, and it's an achievement because building for multiple outcomes is not something we normally do. It requires holding uncertainty in mind. It requires being open to multiple outcomes, so I'm incredibly grateful. This has given us the robust preparation that we need, both for the current course that we're on and also the ability to adjust course if that's needed. It's given us the ability to ensure flexibility for our students, for our staff and faculty to the best of our ability. And we're just going to keep drilling down on that, how to sustain and expand that flexibility. So let me move to a financial update. The headline is that we are still facing enormous uncertainty under pandemic. So we continue to plan prudently to mitigate financial impact for families and for our employees. There's also some good news mixed in with profound uncertainty, thanks to our university-wide efforts this past spring to reduce spending. FY20 ended much better than expected. We're still gaining clarity on the next fiscal year, and our COO, Amy Sebring, will share more updates. I want to say one, maybe 3 words on the campaign close. As the rector said on June 30, we crossed the finish line with enormous success. I too want to acknowledge the work by Matthew Lambert and the entire advancement team and all of their partners, the donors and friends, the neighbors over the past decade. We set ambitious goals beyond our grasp, and we pursued them with vigor. It was fitting that we closed with a sustained focus on diversity and inclusion in One Tribe, One Day. That day brought an upwelling of support for areas of campus best positioned to accelerate progress towards our goal of equity and inclusion. This was even in the midst of pandemic. We raised more money on One Tribe, One Day than we have ever before. More than 50% of our donors focused on our 4 lead D&I gifts, and we've never seen that kind of focused participation before either. That William & Mary has focused in this campaign on access and inclusion was one of the things that called me here. And I've been thinking really hard about how to make that effort visible since so many have asked how we fundraise for D&I. So let me say some concrete things about that, the campaign in this past year. In this campaign, we've created more than 500 new scholarships. Access was the #1 focus of the campaign, and we raised over $300 million for those scholarships. That is 1/3 of the historical scholarships that exist at William & Mary in a single campaign. But we can talk about success in other ways too. In the past year, I led the close of this campaign with 4 transformative gifts, and each in different ways has a core focus on diversity and inclusion. So I'm going to name them. We've been thinking big, so the numbers you're going to hear are big. Question is, how can William & Mary move the needle on equity and justice here and around the world? The Institute for Integrative Conservation, that was a $19 million gift, was motivated by the profound link between environmental degradation and poverty, disempowerment, and disenfranchisement around the world. That link can be broken by partnerships that reverse deforestation, food insecurity within communities, and more. The specific focus, one of the key focuses of that gift and that initiative, is on creating a pipeline of underrepresented professionals in conservation, Black and Indigenous professionals, professionals of color, and women, so that Indigenous communities can lead the conservation efforts that they need and break that link between environmental degradation, poverty, and injustice. Second example was the $1 million Mellon grant for the Lemon Project in Highland that is accelerating William & Mary's study of our history of slavery by including descendant communities and our surrounding communities here in research, design, and exhibition. It's incredibly exciting work. The third, we received an extraordinary gift of art from Sybil Shainwald, over 100 works collected by women artists, about women. Sybil Shainwald started collecting women's art well before anybody else was doing that, and that is going to profoundly change the kind of teaching and exhibition that we can do at our Muscarelli Museum. It's going to change forever the way we tell stories about art in different media. And then today, I'm really proud to announce a $10 million gift to support our military and veteran students. I'm incredibly grateful to the anonymous alumna who funded this project. It's going to enable us to take a whole institution approach to William & Mary's military and veteran programs. We aim to be a national leader in accelerating professional transitions to civilian life. So the count there is well over 30 million raised in high impact gifts for areas that advance D&I and redress injustice. Those are gifts that impact 23185. They have global impact. For our campus, we're also closing in now on fundraising for the Memorial to the Enslaved, and we'll be building it this year, starting that project. So there is much more that we need to do to fully deliver on our values of belonging and inclusion here. I've put forward the major goal of systematically working to eliminate racial bias in university structures and in campus culture. What I'm hearing from the community and students in particular is impatience with a pace that's not fast enough, not loud enough, not bold enough. So I want to acknowledge that criticism now. I share your sense of urgency for anti-racist culture change. I'm all in and I embrace being accountable for it. In this area, I'm not going to ask for your patience because William & Mary does need to accelerate the pace of change and show results more frequently and more clearly. So I'm going to work especially hard this fall on transparency, on naming progress as we achieve it, as I did just now with D&I, with respect to D&I fundraising. Here's the near-term actions, the picture. As many know, the rector charged me with establishing a working group on naming and renaming. The intent for this group is to move with appropriate speed to identify and refine the principles that the board could use in naming or potentially renaming structures and spaces on campus to create a more equitable and inclusive experience of being here in Williamsburg. I'm very grateful to Dr. Warren Buck for chairing this group and for the speed with which they're steaming ahead and for their thoughtfulness and engagement. Their first target is early August, and you're going to hear more from Dr. Glover about their timeline, their process, and the results they are aiming for. So last thing I want to add is that this fall we will be focusing on improving the pathways to and through William & Mary for undocumented students, for first-gen students, Indigenous and low-income students, as well as supporting our global community of international students. William & Mary would not be the institution it is without this vibrant community. I met with William & Mary Fire student leaders a few weeks ago to brainstorm generative strategies for this work. And I met with first-gen leaders, student leaders early in the year. This was just before the pandemic hit. So we're revisiting what we talked about then, I hope next week. Before COVID-19 hit, the key questions we were exploring were how to support clearer paths to William & Mary and what makes for a more welcome experience here. What are effective resources for Black and Indigenous, for students of color, and for first-generation students. With students coming back to campus, I'm enormously eager to think in innovative ways with you about how to do that work better. Vice Provost Steve Hansen is going to be in the lead in close collaboration with the Dean of Students Office. And our timeline, as we imagine being back on campus, is new programming we can implement this year. If we need to pivot to more online programming, we'll innovate that way too. As many know, William & Mary joined the National Challenge to propose new U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement regulations. They were unfair, they were not feasible to implement, and they threatened our core mission, period. They've been changed, but we will continue to be vigilant. We're going to continue to advocate through our legislative liaisons in Congress to ensure that we keep the flexibility that students in every vulnerable category need. I want to close just by saying xenophobia, othering, us versus them thinking, these are known risk factors in pandemic. We will not tolerate them in our house. So I'm incredibly grateful to this whole community for your awareness of these risks, for bringing them forward and elevating them, and for your dedication to warding against them. I'm in it with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Rowe. Sam, will you give us an update on the plans for reopening and what your work groups have been dealing with?
Yes, sir, Mr. Rector. Thank you for the opportunity to do that. And I would start with just echoing some of your comments relative to the community and all the work that has been done by that. whether it was as we pivoted from our normal way of operation to going online and doing a lot of teleworking in the spring, through the work that we're doing now this summer. All of that has required really a deep dive. We have a COVID response team of 20 people representing the campus in a variety of ways, but we found out very quickly that you have to go really deep into the organization in order to understand what we need to do, when we need to do it, and how to do it best. So I would again just echo your comments of support for the folks and thanks to the folks who are doing that. As President Rose said, we are in an environment where the health situation continues to evolve, and that's sometimes daily. And so we continue, as a university and as a response team, to monitor what is going on nationally, at the state, at the local level, looking at the trends that are out there. And, we're down to the level where we are monitoring what's going on with our local hospitals in terms of caseloads and capacities and that type of thing, so that we are as fully informed as possible as we make decisions and make recommendations. And we can see where particularly the university is sitting relative to where, our locality is sitting. Overlaid on that, as the president mentioned, is review of what's going on with the Center for Disease Control, the Virginia Department of Health. The governor is having, weekly news conferences in terms of the COVID activities going on at the state level and at the region. So with all that and trying to stay current and remaining current with what is going on, what we realize is that however we are back this fall, and there will be some students back on campus no matter what, that William & Mary will operate differently. The primary goal, as you can see by the slide there, of our response team really follows what the president said, is that we want to support the teaching and learning that should go on at William & Mary at the high level that we all expect, and the value that's supported and provided to our students and their families. But we want to do that in a way that mitigates the risk, that's done in the safest way possible. And I think in an earlier presentation, we mentioned that we do that through education. In this case, we're working on an online training video that will be required of all faculty, staff, and students for as they come back onto campus. And we know we will have much greater numbers, that everyone is really under the same understanding of what is a community, how we should respond. On the prevention side, the wearing of masks, the physical distancing, de-densifying the campus, all of the things that we talked about in the spring that we needed to do still remain very important for us to be successful as we go forward. We have learned that we need to do targeted communications, that Brian Whitson and his university communications team have done a great job of helping us filter all of our messages, but there's a lot out there. And so some of you may have seen earlier this week that we sent out a message specific to wearing masks in the fall and through the December timeframe, so there is no misunderstanding about what our campus expectations are. So communications, again, is part of the prevention aspect. Ultimately, testing, tracing, I'll talk a little bit more about testing here in a few minutes. And then at the end of the day, there will be active cases of the COVID on campus, just as there are throughout the community, and we need to be prepared for treatment, quarantine, and isolation. As the president said, there was a lot of work done by the provost, the deans, and all of our faculty in assessing the ability to provide in-person instruction. What you see here are the percentages of course sections across the different schools in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. And you can see, a healthy amount of in-person or blended course instruction that will go on. Blended meaning that there will be times when the students are in the classroom with the faculty members, other times when they are not. But you can see a strong commitment by our faculty to be in person and to support our students in that way. So we're very pleased with that. And that really helps for the COVID response team, sets some of the parameters about what we had to do in response, knowing that under the conditions as they exist today, we're going to have a lot of faculty on campus teaching, and of course, we're going to have a lot of students there.
And Sam,
Yes,
these these are correlated as well, right, to faculty requests about being in person or hybrid or online.
Yes, sir. That it reflects the faculty members' preference for that. So, and that was, we thought, very important. And again, the provost and the deans working through that to allow faculty to teach in the way they were most comfortable and where they could deliver the instruction in the most powerful way. We all know that a key portion of the William & Mary experience is outside the classroom in co-curricular activities. And I want to give Drew Stelges, who led a team of 15 people, including 5 students, at looking at the recognized student organizations of all types that we have around here. I think Vice President Ambler has said many times we have something like 400 clubs. That shows the variety of interest and the commitment that our students have to doing things outside the classroom that are many times service oriented, but in all cases really help build the leadership skills of our students. And so Drew and his team have worked through these, and this is very high level and doesn't do justice to the work that they have done in setting guidelines for these organizations. But one fundamental is they will all have their own COVID response plan. So an organization will have to say, this is how we're going to safely go about doing our business. That will be reviewed by the student affairs staff. And probably most importantly, and this is recognizing the fact that, you know, we've compressed this semester. That is intentional in order to reduce the spread of the virus overall, both within the campus and within the community. But that also puts pressure and stress on everything we're doing. And so I love the phrase that of depth over breadth. You know, do fewer things really, really well as an organization rather than trying to do the multitude of things that it ordinarily might to have occurred. So again, virtual meetings for just the normal meetings of these organizations, limit the number of events, limit the number of activities that may go on. And also to track attendance. That will be important if we have to do contact tracing across the university, which we likely will have to do, and that we'll be able to follow, okay, that I was at this event, someone who is tested positive. We will then be able to go back to the tracking of who attended that event and be able to follow up very quickly with that. We continue to promote telework. We've talked with the board before in earlier meetings about this. We recognize the need to support our students, faculty, and staff. This is going to be very different than April. By April, you know, all the students were home. The faculty had pivoted to all online courses. We were doing only essential business services here on campus. So there are actually very few people here on campus. It will be different this fall. The students will be back. The faculty will be teaching in person. And, you know, the public facing nature of many services that we do for our students, faculty, and staff will have to be in person. So we recognize that. One of the things that we've done, and we expect to get this report from all the cabinet members this week and review them and be able to tell staff members, you know, in the next week or so. At the cabinet level, we reviewed all the functions and activities that we do to determine the flexibility to continue to telework. Where it's determined that it makes sense and the nature of the work allows for folks to continue to work off campus, we are going to actively promote that they do that to limit the number of people here on campus. And even in areas where there are situations where people have to be on campus to serve students and others, to the extent that we can alter schedules, work schedules, to limit interactions and make that a safer environment, we will be doing that as well. Telework continues to be, you know, a major opportunity for us to address vulnerable populations, whether it be age, health, or otherwise. That we need to come. So again, teleworking, a mix of working off campus and on campus will continue to be a significant piece of how we respond and one of those differences that will exist as we go into the fall.
Sam?
Yes.
Would you mind going into the compliance issues with ADA and how you're working with the compliance office on some of these communications?
Yes, sir. We have both our general counsel and Pam Mason, our chief compliance officer, are consultants to us. As we go through this, we also work closely with our environmental health and safety office as well to make sure that we are not taking steps that move us outside of the American for Disabilities Acts or other compliance requirements. So we are trying to touch base with those folks as we work through to make sure that we, again, are not violating any current regs. The other thing we're doing is, we're seeing the guidelines that are coming out from the Center for Disease Control, for example. Those are constantly changing as well. So we're monitoring those for compliance. We do, moving on, if there are no other questions, we will have a robust and testing protocol. I will say that, we are exceeding what the Center for Disease Control has recommended, and we think that's the best thing to be doing in terms of support for our campus. As the president mentioned, we continue to work very closely with the other Virginia public institutions that have medical centers. So we're getting their best knowledge about prevalence and case studies and how best to test and that type of thing. So that is helping us. We have a third-party health service provider who is also, part of that group that's helping us. And you can see here, the approach that we're taking to that. We will test all students at the start of the semester because we want to have a good baseline of where we are in that process and as we bring students back to campus. After that, we will prevalence test. Think of that as sampling, the student body, testing throughout the semester periodically to give us a sense of two things. One, just overall, how are we moving on campus? Are we seeing more as we do samples? Are we seeing greater positive tests for that? That also allows us to compare to what's going on in our localities around us. And that will tell us, are we a hot spot relative to the locality or not? Prevalence testing also will allow us within the campus to determine whether maybe a particular dormitory or activity is seeing more positive tests and will allow us to do that. And then a last thing on the student side before I move to employees is at-will testing. At-will meaning you do it on your own, you're not required to do it. But we'll have that available for students as they leave for this fall semester to go back home, to the extent that the student says, I want to be sure that I'm healthy before I go back to visit my family and others. There will be the ability for that to happen. On the employee side, we'll have that same type of at-will testing available, subsidized to the university. So there's a tolerable copay. Again, we're hoping to keep that number as small as possible. But again, for an employee who may not even be showing symptoms, but wants to be sure that they are not asymptomatic or not carrying the virus, again, through our third-party provider and those relationships, we'll be able to have that testing done. We also will do the same sort of prevalence testing across our employees to do the same type of thing. What's happening within the workforce that we should be paying close attention to and not just depend on identifying active cases. And then finally, there are some areas where employees have to work so closely with students or others that close interaction probably requires that we test that whole population. We're doing an evaluation now across campus of what are those groups in order to make sure that we've adequately done those testing as well. So again, a robust effort that is not just at the beginning of when we open up for the fall, but continues through the whole semester. And then ultimately, and then Mr. Rector, I'm available for any questions from the board, is how do we actually manage through it? And you can see the things that go back to where we've started. The good recommendations that came out of the CDC at the beginning remain those. I can't stress more the first one. Stay home if you're sick. If you're an employee and you're not feeling well, and we'll have a symptom tracker in place, and you take that prompt from that symptom tracker and it says, oh gosh, I may have something going on here, don't come to work. We had instances in the spring where people knowingly came to work and that had consequences. And if you're a student and you get up and you don't feel well, don't come to class. But after that, physical distancing combined with face coverings, masking, are critical to making sure that we keep the campus safe and we minimize the potential for spread of the virus. Personal hygiene, hand washing, and all the other things that talked about. And then ultimately, we as we identify cases, and as we say, there will be some that we isolate those students. We were able to do that at Richmond Hall. If you're an employee, you'll get advice from your healthcare provider that will say, go home and stay isolated. And then working with the Virginia Department of Health, will determine who needs to be quarantined after that through contact tracing. And then ultimately, the last thing there is our success will depend on the community. Mr. Rector, as you said early on, the community has been working very hard to be sure that we're prepared. It's going to require the community sort of following the rules, being true to those rules, and having that cultural shift that really says we are all responsible for each other. And if we are follow everything that's been put in place, we think we'll have an environment that's safe for our students, faculty, and staff. So, Mr. Rector, I would stop with that. I'm glad to answer any other questions from the board.
Great. Thank you, Sam. And I do want to, again, express the gratitude of the board to all the people that have been working on these committees and doing all the work to, make all this stuff happen. I know that from talking to Catherine, and also for you to move into this important role, easy retirement for you. But I think the one thing is, I've talked to the president, about a plan B, plan C, plan D. I think one of the things that would be helpful, and I think, the reality is we just have to, wait as the, president outlined in her opening about, where we are, where the governor is, where the feds are, and all that stuff. But I think one of the things that would be helpful is maybe for our retreat is, I think probably the most disruptive scenario would be to, have the students come back, have them here for a week, 2 weeks, a month, or whatever, and then send them back home because of something. So I think it would be helpful to to know the criteria by which you would make that decision. And it might be something as simple as the governor said we have to do it or whatever, but I think it would be good just to know what those factors are. I know that you followed some in the spring, but now we have the benefit of the doubt, or the benefit of that experience. So I think that would be helpful when we get to August.
Yes, sir. We'll be glad to do that. And the president mentioned in her comments that we're data driven as much as we can in understanding what's going on. And so, another thing under development is a dashboard that will look at what is going on here on campus. That's where the prevalence testing and other things help us. But it also will tell us what's going on and what are the trends around us beyond just what we hear from governor's press conferences and those pieces. But we will be glad to bring that to you. That go, no-go decision, that plan B, we had a town hall with the faculty yesterday. That's certainly one of the areas that they're most interested as well, is what, they use the word thresholds. That would lead to a decision to do something different than what we're planning. We still plan that everyone will be here as I've outlined, but we realize that the overall situation in the country or in Virginia could change that would drive that.
Great. Thank you. And I we didn't mention it today, but we did talk about it last time. I also think the very close coordination with the other Virginia schools has been really helpful, and I know will continue going forward. So that's been good.
Yes, sir. Just to comment on that particular thing, one of the things that early on the Council of Presidents had a working group that they had pulled together that is morphed into everyone at all the Virginia publics that are in my position. We're having weekly calls to both get a sense of where people are and what they're doing and get best practices from each other, but also really to identify any gaps in any institution's plannings, where somebody said, oh, hadn't thought about that particular issue and that type of thing. So we are working very closely, not just with the medical centers where we're having those conversations, but all the Virginia institutions.
Great. And I know virtually all of our committees will have some way that they touch that and can be supportive of the work that's being done on campus. So thank you. Any questions from any board members? Okay, Sam, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Keep at it. I'm going to move to the financial update, and I did forget to mention that Amy has moved into a new position as our COO, and we are glad that you are in that job, and a great time to be counting numbers and things. So thank you.
Indeed, thank you. 14 days in, and it only feels like 14 months or so at this point. So it's been a busy time financially since we last talked. The real update is around fiscal 20 and the end of the fiscal year. I think I'm going to get slides pulled up. With the slides up? There we go. So really today, not a whole lot has changed since we talked last, but wanted to give you a quick update on what we know now that we didn't know a few weeks ago. There is some good news, and it's nice to be able to deliver a little bit of good news here and there. We did end FY20 relatively strong. As you know, we took pretty dramatic steps across campus to limit spending to only those essential things that we absolutely had to do. Fourth quarter of the fiscal year, and to reduce hiring only to mission critical positions. In net, we generated over $7 million in savings as a result of those activities in the fourth quarter. So that's going to create a little bit of cushion for us going into this fiscal year. In addition, the news for the Commonwealth was more positive than I think we had originally feared, and that they had originally feared. So they're looking at now a $236 million shortfall, which is much, much better than the $1 billion that Secretary Lane had originally indicated. And even with that good news, we know that there's still a lot of uncertainty around FY21. And so I wish I could tell you that the crystal ball had become a lot clearer over the last several weeks. We still know that FY21 is really going to be a different year for us, and unlike anything we've seen before. So we continue to project a shortfall between 30 and 100 million. I know that's a wide variation, but we're dealing with a lot of unknowns at this point. And so we will continue to be mindful and watching and understanding what happens with enrollment and with the public health situation that both Sam and President Rowe have already referred to. We do know that we have revenue streams that are at risk, and we also know that we're going to be operating in a more costly environment. Operating costs around PPE, testing, cleaning, symptom checking, all of the things you've heard about today, those come with costs, but those are costs well worth taking when we consider what's at stake. So we are continuing to monitor that. We are also, as part of that, trying to understand what our options are and what our best tools are to meet whatever the challenges are that we face in the upcoming or in this fiscal year. I will remind you the business model is complex for higher ed, and we know that because our revenue streams are tied in specific ways, that we're going to have really a very multifaceted approach in terms of solutions for next year. Briefly, I'll review the tools in the toolkit on the next slide. These are things we've talked about before and continue to work really diligently on. So we continue the mission critical budget review and curriculum alignment that the provost and I started back in the spring. Obviously, we're looking and grateful to have some cash balances and carry forward funds that we can put towards any anticipated or any shortfall that we realize this fall. We're looking aggressively at debt refunding either through the state or through university, issuing university debt and or issuing new debt and thinking about lines of credits and ways that we may be able to weather the storm, both in terms of providing some immediate cash, but also as potentially an investment strategy and thinking about how we strengthen the university going forward. We continue to do analysis on our endowment payout rates. I think I've folks, that feels like an easy solution. Over 85% of our endowments are actually restricted for purpose. And so we have to be mindful that although that may create some cash for us, it doesn't necessarily create a lot of flexibility. And then we continue to look at both targeted and general personnel actions. This is one of the last tools we want to have to get to, and we recognize that this may impact different parts of the campus differently. There may be areas, as Sam mentioned, depth, not breadth. And so there may be some services and things in the fall semester that we offer differently or don't offer at all. And so if there isn't work to be done in certain areas, we may need to furlough employees until we're back at a point where there is active work to be done. And so we're working through that strategically and in a very deliberate way. And we also recognize we may get to a point where we need to think more broadly about university-wide personnel actions. We talked about that with you in the last board meeting. Continue to view that as a last resort and to hold to the commitment that we've had to try to do the best we can to make sure that we are protecting and mindful of the people that make this university run. Having said that, we also are planning, and we know that we may get to a point where we have to go down that path. Today, I remain cautiously optimistic. Our numbers continue to look good. We finished FY20 strong. Our faculty and staff have risen to the occasion. Our students are very much looking forward to the new academic year ahead. And so with that, I will only touch on the next slide in terms of key dates that I want to make sure are before you. We do have a few coming up, and so our next several meetings will be reflective of those. As we continue to say, early August, we'll start getting final numbers in terms of fall enrollment, housing and dining numbers. So that'll be happening over the next 3 to 4 weeks. Although the date hasn't been set yet, we continue to hear that we should expect a special session of the General Assembly in late August or early September. And then I mentioned in fall, we will be paying attention to the Treasury Board and Virginia College Building Authority meeting dates. Depending on the decisions that we make around debt, we may be coming to the board with a resolution to allow us some flexibility to use debt going forward. And depending on which tool we use, we may also need to seek Treasury Board or VCBA approval. That was a lightning round, but I was mindful of time. I'm happy to answer questions if anybody has any.
Amy, one question, and you don't have to go into any detail, but I haven't really seen much, and I haven't looked at it, so it may exist, but has Sodexo been sort of explicit about how they will handle food service in the fall, or is that sort of still continuing?
Yeah, they have been, and they are following all VDH and CDC guidelines around that. We've been in very close communications with them. They've actually been helpful in they've shared with the COVID response team, for instance, recommendations around signage and other things, and it's been a really collaborative effort to make sure that we're working in lockstep together.
Good. Any other questions for Amy?
Amy, I assume, as with Sam, you're in contact with your counterparts at the other schools. Are you hearing anything surprising, different in terms of what the other Virginia schools are doing? And in terms of magnitude of shortfall for 21, is it proportionally about where you'd expect, given our relative size, to say a Tech or a UVA or a VCU?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we are sharing information broadly on just about every domain. There is no playbook for this stuff, so we are trying not to reinvent the wheel where we don't have to, and to be as collaborative as we can be. For virtually every Virginia institution, enrollments are really the most significant factor. And so we have shared, what we're seeing in terms of enrollment trends. I continue to be optimistic for us. Our numbers are strong, and some of our peer institutions have not been as fortunate in their numbers, but it's a moving target at this point. So I think proportionally, we're all looking at the same relative range, realizing that the tools that each institution have may be a little bit different.
Excellent. Good. Any other questions for Amy? All right. Apparently in our May meeting, as thorough as we thought we were, we apparently skipped one element as it relates to tuition and funding. So I'm going to ask Jim to raise that, and it will be our sole resolution that we will address today.
All right, in resolution 10 that we adopted at the May meeting, we set forth the tuition for the coming year. However, we need to make a correction in it for those students participating in the joint degree program with the University of St. Andrews. Amy, do you want to just give a brief explanation?
Yep, happy to. So unfortunately, I think this was a case of version control. And so we did, as the board signaled that it wanted us to go back and make sure that we were holding tuition flat across the board for all existing programs. This program in particular, because of the collaborative nature with the University of St. Andrews, the provost and I needed to reach out to our colleagues there. And we did so, certainly intended that the resolution in front of the board would hold tuition flat for the upcoming year for that program as well as our other programs, but we didn't update the board materials for that. And so the resolution that you had before you in May actually showed a slight increase from $40,990 to $42,220. And so in order to correct that, the board would need to take action today, just recognizing that error and recognizing the intention to keep the tuition level at the same level it was last academic year.
So I'd like to move that we reverse the approved increase to the St. Andrews program, keep it flat.
Second.
All right, thank you. Any questions? All right, Mr. Fox, will you call the roll?
This is for the executive committee. Mr. Rector,
Aye.
Payne,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Hickson,
Aye.
Ms. Roday,
Aye.
Ms. Schultz,
Aye.
and Mr. Wolfote. I think that was an aye.
Aye.
There we go.
All right, so we look for, that motion passes. So all tuition and all fees are flat. And we look forward to Scotland and the rest of Europe letting us back in. All right, thank you. Any other questions for Amy or Sam relative to reopening? Ms. Roday?
I have a question about fees. Amy, have you looked at all at any potential adjustments in the fee area depending upon A, B, C?
Certainly, we are in discussion around that and tracking with the various plans to make sure we're in alignment. Yes, I think I had two meetings on that topic yesterday. So we are certainly understand that we need to be cognizant of that. And at this point, many of the things that we are offering, that we intend to offer in person, even if we're not offering in person, we are finding alternative ways to provide those services to students remotely, recognizing that we are going to have students remote in any scenario that we move forward with. And some of those alternative solutions are actually at an increased cost. So we're mindful of that as well. But that's been a collective effort across all of the non-academic areas to make sure we have an understanding of where we sit with all of that.
So might there yet be an adjustment in fees between now and when we start?
At this point, we aren't anticipating one, but certainly would come back to the board. It's the board's prerogative to set tuition and fees, and we will come back to the board to seek your guidance as we continue to navigate through any changes that we see for the fall.
Thank you, Amy.
Good. Amy, I can't remember what the name of it, whether it was the CARES Act or which one, but do I recall that you did reserve some money for student assistance for the fall? Or was it all spent in the spring? Right.
Yeah. So we've spent about 1.5 of the 1.9 million. So we do have about 400,000 left. There are, the feds didn't make it easy on us. There are some restrictions around how those dollars can be applied, but yes, we intentionally reserve some for the fall.
Okay, good, great. Anybody else have any questions? All right, great. Thank you very much, Amy, and thank you, Jim, for that. Dr. Glover, will you give us an update on the working group?
Sure. I just want to provide you all with a brief update on the policies for naming and renaming. We termed it PNR, but the committee, the working group that has been established, because we're early in our work, but I think it's important for you to at least know the process, and you'll have an opportunity to hear more in the next 3 weeks. As the president said, we're led by Dr. Warren Buck, and it's a committee of faculty, staff, and students and alumni who have the domain knowledge and expertise to really deal with this complicated and complex issue. We are working intentionally and with deliberate speed. The committee has been meeting twice a week for 2 weeks, reviewing the Lemon Project report and other documents. We've had a great head start because of the 10-year research effort that the Lemon Project has produced in its report. Along with the research is probably the essential element of really listening to our constituencies. And we've done this in 2 ways. We've created a web page where you'll find updates on the working group and be able to provide feedback and comments that are directly given to the committee for their deliberations every week. We have scheduled 6 total listening sessions via Zoom for the upcoming weeks. We hosted the first student session this past Monday, and the second student session will be July 20th at 5 o'clock. The second session is for faculty and staff, and that will be held on July 16th, tomorrow at 11 a.m. and July 22nd at 1. The remaining 2 sessions are for alumni and friends. Those are scheduled for July 23rd at 12 o'clock noon and July 27th at 5 o'clock. These listening sessions are focusing on the first part of the charge that the working group has, which is naming and renaming buildings, spaces, and structures, and developing commemorative explanatory markers throughout campus. Our deliverables to the board within the next couple of weeks, which is at the August board retreat, is to provide sound guiding principles and a process. These principles will allow the board to move quickly and as it has asked to with respect to the remaining Confederate names. So as I said, the committee of the working group is working really fast, but we're being thoughtful because we know that this is work that's going to be lasting, and we want to make sure that it's done in the right way. As the committee has met and reflected on the scope of our work, we realize that making spaces more welcoming is definitely important, and naming is one part of that. But we don't want that to end the conversation. We see this as just the first step. Moving on, we want to make sure we look at the systemic issues, larger issues that exist on campus, and that we examine them in all the ways that we can make William & Mary a more hospitable and welcoming place for all. And you'll hear more at the board retreat.
Sean, I have a question. One of the things you said was you focused on Confederate monuments. Is that the limited scope of the committee?
No, that was just one of our charges. One of the parts of our charge. Our committee was given 4 charges. And so that was one of the first things that was listed in the charge.
What are the other charges?
Brian, what I was about to say was that when I requested that the president convene this, I wanted it to be done in sort of a timely fashion so that we would be able to act quickly on things that were obvious, but also to move forward throughout the year and certainly no later than February on some of those larger landscape issues. So things beyond the obvious Confederate stuff, things that we've talked about before. So I wanted to be clear that we're not waiting until February. We retain the right to act at any time, but we do want to go through this process that this work group will establish for us, and then figure out the sort of sequencing of those things as we go forward.
And so where do you see things like the history department being named for white supremacists? I mean, where are we going to deal with that? Because that's not a building name.
Well, they're not limited to buildings. They're limited to the landscape of the campus. And landscape to me is pretty wide, pretty vague and pretty widespread. So that they've already gone through, at least my understanding is, you've gone through and added a bunch of things to your discussion list, right? And sort of timed those out as to when you want to address them, right?
Exactly. We're just trying to work. This was just the initial work that we're doing, and that's first the codifying of the principles and guidelines. But we are looking at the entire landscape, Mr. Woodfuck. We're looking at physical spaces and structures in this naming process, and that's where the principles will be set up.
So you would consider the naming of a department?
Yes.
Any other questions?
I have one, Dr. Glover. As you're doing this work, do you want members of the board to be attending the friends and alumni listening session, or how would you like us to engage, if at all?
I don't know if I can answer that or not, but Mr. Rector, they're open. So as an alumni and friend, I can't imagine why not.
Yeah, they're like any other meeting.
Yeah.
I think the only thing I would say is, just to be careful if it's a small meeting or something, not to be in a place where you sort of inhibit the conversation. But I think in general, when you have large town hall meetings and stuff like that, it's good to listen.
This is Barbara Johnson. Are all the sessions going to be the same in terms of the facilitation and the questions that are reviewed?
Yes. And it's really just comments. It's not question and answer, it's comments on the principles and the way in which we structure them.
Great.
Yeah.
So this is Ann Lee. Ahead of these, like for the ones for the alumni and friends, are you going to publish the principles so that they will have them, or is the plan you just talk about them, introduce them on the Zoom, and then people respond?
So the principles have not been established yet. We are just taking comments and input on what should be included in the principles.
And you do plan to post them for comment, right? So we see this as iterative. That's part of the process design.
But right now it's just a listening session, yeah.
Good.
Mr. Director, this is Will Payne. I just want to thank Sean for leading this effort. I know AJ's on part of this group. I've had a number of conversations with Dr. Buck on a regular basis here the last couple of weeks, and he's really encouraged by all the discussion that's been had so far, and he's been of course really active. And I just want to commend this whole team for acting quickly, the president and the rector and Sean, and it's really great to see everyone, especially those who are on this working group, step up and help us move forward.
Mr. Director, quickly, I just wondered, Dr. Glover, if you could give me the dates again of the alumni and friends listening sessions.
Absolutely. July 23rd at 12 noon and July 27th at 5:00 p.m. And registration is required. So a link will be sent out. The president's office has been announcing all of these listening sessions in advance.
Great, thank you.
We'll send those out to the board members and with the links if you'd like those too.
Right. I mean, clearly, a principle here is we want to be as transparent as possible. So, and I would echo that appreciation, Dr. Glover. I know you all have a lot of other stuff going on, but this is a unique moment for us to do something good. So thank you.
Yes.
All right.
Just follow up on
Yes.
Brian's question. So when you say the landscape is broadly defined, would that extend to award namings, for example?
I would think so, but actually from the first student session, one of the things that came up was award names and scholarship names. So it will be a part of the deliberation for the committee to think about.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Rector, can I add one more thanks to Jessica Walton, who is staffing this committee. You can go far faster when you have a really great organization, and she's been leaning in to be able to be sure that as many people as possible can express their perspectives and give us their insights, and I'm really grateful for that.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. All right, we're going to turn now to quick reports from the faculty, staff, and student assemblies. And before I do, I want to just also welcome, I know we have lots of staff here and a lot of other people, but I do also want to note that we also officially have our two of our three new deans listening in, and also Dean Pulley. So welcome to all of you. I know you were on the call the last time, but good to have you officially on board. So we will start with Professor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Rector. Just a couple of quick updates. The Faculty Assembly held a town hall yesterday with over 450 participants. I want to give you just three takeaways from that. The faculty really are engaged in this planning process for reopening, and they do have a lot of questions. And I think that the message is specifics. The faculty want the specifics. They want to know what the thresholds are, what the criteria are that would transition us back to remote learning. They want to know how we're going to manage compliance with whatever regulations are in place, who's going to monitor those, and who's going to enforce those. For example, if you had a student who attended class who didn't have a mask, can a faculty member say, you must leave? The last point is that there is a great concern for care for our vulnerable populations that are in our environment. One of these examples would be, is it possible for us to make no-cost testing available for our employees that are below a certain level of income? So these are some of the issues that the faculty are dealing with and thinking about. I want to thank publicly Sam, Amy, and Chris Lee for being the individuals to answer these questions. They gave their time and answered over 50 questions that were directed at them over an hour and a half period. So this is what we're working on. These are the issues that we're looking at, and the biggest issue is communication and information coming from the administration to the faculty. It's flowing, but we need to keep that flow and we need to be more specific. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. I don't know if you all have this, but on my, maybe because I'm a host, on my Zoom thing, I actually have go slower, go faster, stop. And I thought I was going to have to use it on everyone, but you all have been very, very efficient. So, Ms. Newby, welcome, and tell us about the staff update, please.
Thank you, Mr. Rector, and warm greetings to you all. So I will start with PPFA. They are currently in transition and will meet on the 20th to do their officers election. Mary Ellen Maurer is currently, or has officially stepped into her role as PPFA president, and she works in conference services. The staff assembly has had multiple virtual water coolers, which allows us to engage with the staff. The first water cooler focused on race and race relations and current events surrounding race. The second one focused on how do we move together, and we use the breakout room feature in Zoom and talks about ways we can commit to action. And then the third focused on the COVID anxieties and returning to campus, which concluded in staff being overall apprehensive, stressed, and agitated. Staff are concerned about the timing, or if there will be timing to be able to pivot, and request being as proactive as possible, as the last pivot from campus did not allow much breathing room for staff, and there was a lot of sort of frustration. And that's what that virtual water cooler ended with. I'd like to also announce that we had our retreat, and within 2 hours, we were able to discuss the events from last year, did a SWOT analysis, and used the breakout room features to work on our committees to improve process within the staff assembly for sustainability and consistency in our commitment to process. We continue to focus on our outreach to facilities management, and we just had our first meeting, or myself and the VP had our first meeting with Sam Hayes. And in June, the staff assembly partnered with PPFA to give out snacks to our essential employees on campus as a token of our appreciation for holding down the front lines. Robin, our VP, and I have been in constant contact and working with the president, the provost, the COO, and the CHRO. And then lastly, PPFA and staff assembly will continue to work together to be collaborative in supporting all of staff. And then also myself and AJ are working to strengthen the relationship between our assemblies.
Great. Thank you very much. AJ, student perspective, what's going on?
Thank you, Mr. Director. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are all healthy and safe. This has certainly been a challenging time for all of us, so please prioritize your mental, emotional, and physical wellness. No pun intended, across the board, prioritizing those things will determine our success. Before I forget, I just want to mention that we have approved 2 of our board reps, and I just want to give you the list of them now. So Kyle Vasquez, the Vice President, will be in Institutional Advancement. Milani Wright will serve on Buildings and Grounds, the Chief of Staff. Graham Pfeiffer will serve at Student Experience, and I will serve on Financial Affairs. We're still waiting to get a last member approved, so we will be able to get that to you soon. Thank you for those who've reached out to me after the previous meeting, after my remarks. As I've said to many of you, they were hard to write, harder to say, but cathartic once I said them. I do not enjoy sharing personal stories like that, so I assure you my remarks today will not be like before and not nearly as long. I just want to update you all on student concerns surrounding diversity, inclusion, and the pandemic. As you are all aware, the community has been very vocal and active about their concerns over the past few months regarding diversity and inclusion at William & Mary and the pandemic. We have seen a number of petitions dedicated to these ends that have been well researched and thought out. We have met with student activists such as Alton Costin III, Michael Jackson, Felicia Hayes, Salimata Sanfo, and Carr Fowler to hear their concerns and ideas. We have received several emails from different communities, including the National Pan-Hellenic Council at William & Mary. We have received letters from many students, faculty, now the Huron Willis Alumni Association, and now most recently from Ms. Kiata Bonds. Now, this last letter certainly did not hold back any punches, and it was not easy for me to read. However, regardless of our personal feelings about the mode of delivery of this message, we as elected leaders must acknowledge the following. This reaction and those like it stem from historical trauma, frustration, and pain. Despite modality, we must still discern some truth in criticism, and that this is only the beginning, the tip of the iceberg. On that note, I just wanted to elevate some concerns that are consistent throughout these petitions, letters, and emails, and were also reflected in our Juneteenth town hall. I am cognizant that not all of these concerns are requests that the board can act on, but I hope that we will discuss them as our attention to these concerns will ensure their resolution. Here are some points that reflect the thematic concerns that students have regarding diversity and inclusion. Transparency and clarity in communication. And I'm not going to expand on all of these, but for this first point with some of the letters that I've seen, if we embolden that just even a little bit, it would help to assuage a lot of confusion and frustration that is going on within the student body and the greater William & Mary community at this point. Recurring D&I training for faculty and staff regarding ethnicity and race, affinity group, religion, and other identities. 3, bureaucratic support for the D&I office. Many students have suggested that this should be elevated, but we can talk about that later. Standardized D&I practices across academic departments. The general lack of knowledge within the William & Mary community of its history, particularly its involvement in slavery, the Confederacy, and Jim Crow. Staff equity and protection against discrimination and racism across campus. And the strain between the student body and the surrounding police departments. So those are about D&I. Here are some points that reflect thematic concerns that students have regarding the fall semester. 1, William & Mary community responsibility and enforcement of wearing masks. 2, off-campus student life under COVID-19 regulations, 3, balancing a William & Mary academic rigor during the pandemic. 4, the possibility of an outbreak on campus. 5, vulnerability of immunocompromised students, faculty, and staff. specifically custodial and facilities management. And 6, anticipation of a higher need of mental health resources for all students. There are a lot more that have been raised by students, but we feel that these several points regarding D&I and COVID-19 have transcended all the petitions, letters, and emails sent by students. This is an unprecedented time, and while we have to rely on 328 years of persistence and determination, we must also take a critical look at what we have done wrong in those 3 centuries and how we can improve upon the values crucial to our communal identity in this century: belonging, flourishing, and respect. Let's be more candid and open about these problems more than we have ever been before, and let's move with some urgency. The decisions that we make in the next several months will forever change our past, present, and future. We have a unique opportunity to harness this anger and fear to propel William & Mary structurally and culturally into a new era. All of Student Assembly is vested in working with you to help find these solutions and create tangible change. Our community is watching us, and we must act urgently. I think that's all that I have, so thank you, Mr. Rector.
Thank you. AJ, what were, I think I might have missed, what are the concerns about off-campus? What does that relate to?
Off-campus student life under COVID-19 regulations, so enforcement, that would be kind of along similar lines, students getting together, things of that nature, and how we're going to collaborate with the police department in the surrounding area.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. You reminded me, I didn't mention to the rest of the board that Barbara Johnson and I met with a number of the student activists that you named last week, and AJ, and went over a lot of their concerns and answered some of their questions about the board and our schedule for the year. So thank you, and thanks for arranging that for us. Good. Any questions for our 3 reps? Great. All right. Thank you. We are going to go into closed session. For those people who are not participating in closed session, we will not be voting on anything when we come out, so there are no action items. And we're going to just focus on digging deeper onto some of the issues that remain. So, Ms. Johnson, will you read the resolution, please? And I will just be clear from a logistics standpoint, we will exit this room, but we will come back into open session to close the meeting.
Barbara, you're muted.
You're still muted.
There you go.
There you go.
All right. A motion that the board go into closed session for the following reason. Pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711.A.1 for a discussion of the assignment, appointment, performance, and salaries of specific officers or employees, including the president, the executive leadership team, and the Department of Athletics, and pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711.A.8 for consultation with legal counsel regarding specific personnel matters requiring legal advice.
Great. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Secretary, will you call the roll?
Mr. Rector.
Aye.
Mr. Payne.
Aye.
Ms. Johnson.
Aye.
Mr. Hickson.
Aye.
Ms. Roday.
Aye.
Ms. Schultz.
Aye.
And Mr. Woolfolk.
Aye.
All right, excellent. We will go into closed session. The following staff will be participating: the president, the general counsel, the COO, and the athletic director. So thank you all for participating.
Information Act were discussed, and only matters identified in the motion to have the closed session were discussed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Rector,
Aye.
Mr. Payne,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Hickson,
Aye.
Ms. Roday,
Aye.
Ms. Schultz, Ms. Schultz, and Mr. Woolfolk.
Aye.
All right, great.
Ms.
Thank
Schultz
you.
is out there somewhere.
Oh, she said, you could see that she said aye. Yes. Okay, so just a couple announcements of things that are coming up. So first off, there is an investment subcommittee meeting on July 24th via Zoom. If you'd like to participate in that, contact Michael, but I assume you'll send out the information anyway. Prior to our retreat, meaning in the next few days, you will receive 2 emails from me. The first will be both presidents' self-appraisals. And I have a couple questions, real simple ones for everyone to answer so that we can complete their performance appraisals and give them feedback as we move into the next year. And the second one will be a board evaluation, a shorter version than what we did 2 years ago, but still an opportunity for us to get some feedback from everyone on that. As noted, we have the board retreat in person in Williamsburg, scheduled for August 3rd and 4th. And I will be speaking to each of you about the arrangements for that and just making sure that we're on track for that. As the president mentioned, we may have an additional August executive committee meeting if there's anything that we need to decide before students are back on campus. So please pay attention for that. And then our next regularly scheduled board meeting is September 24th, 25th. We are streamlining our fall board meetings to make them shorter. It is likely, almost certain, that we will not have the Blue Room event that we normally have, so we'll have to find another way to initiate Cynthia. And we likely will not have our dinner in the Great Hall, so we'll have to find another way to honor our departing board member and board reps for that. And then again, we'll think of those as we get more details on the board scale, on the school schedule going forward. So that's it on the announcements. Anything else, Michael, that I forgot?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone for the time and attention. We covered a lot of stuff, and I really appreciate all the hard work that's been done by the staff and the faculty and the students to get us there. It really is going to continue to be a collaborative effort to get us to as normal a place as we can be and be consistent with the principles that the president outlined about a safe reopening. So thank you all, and I will adjourn this meeting.
Thank you, sir.